What's up? What's up? Polo Sports Talk and Entertainment here again with another one. Be sure to hit that like button. Subscribe to the channel if you're not a member. And also hit the notifications too so that you're able to get all of my videos. Now, I want to give a first off, I want to give a shout out to the homie, Too Raw for TV, man, because he talked about David Robinson the other day. And, before I get this started, I want to let people know something very clear that these two guys right here, when you talk about Hakeem the Dream, Olajuwon, who I have as my starting center of all time, by the way, and when you talk about the Admiral, David Robinson, you know what I'm saying? Two Titans, no matter what, no matter how you feel about it. And they were transcendent. And let me tell you why before I get to the gist of everything. Both of these players could face you up and they could handle they had a decent handle, and on top of that they could step out and hit the mid range. Now I heard somebody on a video, I forget which video it was, but they said that all that they were primarily back to the basket player. That's not true. That's not true. Especially when you talk about Hakeem Olajuwon, and especially when you talk about David Robinson. David Robinson, athleticism and agility was off the charts, especially before he started he had that knee injury, and then of course he had to make some adjustments to his game, and he wasn't the same as the David Robinson that came out of Navy, in the late '80s. Here's the thing, man. Here's the thing you got to understand. They're under the assumption that they only played one way. And that's not true at all. That's not true. Okay. Now, I'm gonna get to, statistics and all that other stuff later, you know what I'm saying? But I wanna talk about something too, because listen, Hakeem Olajuwon all time in terms of stats alone, he owned David Robinson. And of course he was older than David Robinson, of course. But he owned David Robinson. No question about it. Now, in the regular season all time, David Robinson, he led Hakeem in terms of regular season wins, but not as far as statistics were concerned. You know what I'm saying? Especially when these guys met up. When David Robinson was first coming into the league and everything, Hakeem was destroying David Robinson on every level. Now there would be some times when David Robinson, they would be neck and neck, and David Robinson would do his thing too. Don't get me wrong. David Robinson did have some great games against him, especially defensively. I don't think a lot of people understood. Like, there was one game when they played against each other. I think David Robinson, he had like 18 points, but he was double digit in rebounds, but also at the same token, Also, at the same token, he had 9 blocks to go along with that. Um, you know, but the thing about it is that Hakeem Olajuwon, he didn't need to wear any fancy shoes. He wore Spaldings. He was doing this with Spaldings. David Robinson had his own shoe in his name. He had he had Nikes. He was with Nike. He was with Nike brand. He was with the swoosh. And Hakeem was still coming out there. You could buy Hakeem shoes at Kmart or Walmart or Payless or some shit like that. You know what I'm saying? And he was still coming out there, still making David Robinson look look silly. Now, this was the year that David Robinson had won MVP. Other guys did not the big man or whatever, but I'm just talking about in basketball in general. Hakeem Olajuwon kept it pretty much, quiet, and uh, even Shaquille O'Neal had even referenced to Hakeem Olajuwon and basically said that Hakeem Olajuwon didn't talk trash. He worked hard, and the only thing that he would say is good shot, young fella, or uh, if you hit him or something like that, he'd be like, ooh, oh man, that was strong or something like that. But he never let it get to him, is what I'm saying. And he was able to soak all that in like a sponge and use his infuriation on the opponent. And this is what you have right here, a classic example of. And see, as far as David Robinson, now one thing I will give is that David Robinson, he didn't start having a team around him until San Antonio, started to. They didn't start really building a team around him until like the late '90s. Of course, when Tim Duncan, had came to the pickup of Tim Duncan and everything like that, and that's when they finally was able to, put some pieces around David Robinson. But for the most part, you know, I mean, yes, he had, Dennis Rodman, what I'm saying, Vinny Del Negro, Sean Elliott. Now, this is the thing I don't think a lot of people understand. Before Sean Elliott, had started having problems, I think, with his kidney. Sean Elliott was a decent scorer. You know what I'm saying? And I've seen Sean Elliott, man, right before my eyes, man. Sean Elliott could really hoop, man. And then once he went with like I think it was with Detroit and all that other stuff, and of course he wasn't quite the same, but that was because of his health problems. And then that you also have to take into consideration that's the same thing that happened to um, Alonzo Mourning too. But you know, I think people get this assumption that Hakeem had all the this nice brand of shoe and everything like that. No, he did this in Spaldings, man. And you you would think a guy like this would have had some Nikes on, would have had some Reeboks, at the time because Reebok was hot, some Reeboks on, or even some Converse. You know what I'm saying? Even though Converse was the shoe in the '80s up until Jordan started making Nike an entity and everything. But dog, It was there was no match for Hakeem. And listen, and this was before that injury. This was before that injury. You know what I'm saying? I mean, he just was on a whole nother level, right? Now, let's just do the hold on one second, because I'll get surgical and get scientific and all that other stuff. You know what I'm saying? I mean, a lot of people they want me to get surgical with stuff, and everybody likes to use. They go to Hakeem. You know what I'm saying? They study Hakeem. You know what I'm saying? Now, believe it or not, they study David Robinson too. You know what I'm saying? David Robinson actually, I don't think David Robinson gets enough credit for actually revolutionizing the center position because that's what he did. David Robinson could face you up. He could face you up, and he was him and Hakeem. Their games actually were a lot similar, but of course Hakeem was his footwork was on a whole nother level. But David Robinson was an athletic big man that could face you up, triple threat, and a lot of people don't understand this too. He could he could guard the high post too. I don't think people understood that he could guard the high post and the low post. He was extremely versatile, extremely versatile, extremely versatile. You know, so David Robinson, he, they got he got a winning record against Hakeem, and it's at 32-16 all time. You know what I'm saying? You got to give him credit for that because they faced each other 48 times, but Hakeem actually won when it really mattered, and he had a postseason record against Hakeem Olajuwon of 4-2, right? All time, all time. Hakeem averaged 23.5 points. Hakeem, David Robinson averaged 20. 11 rebounds, 11.4 rebounds for Hakeem, 11.3 for David Robinson. I talked about that earlier. He wasn't that far off in terms of rebounds because he was actually pretty defensive. He did a good job defensively. Then on top of that, David Robinson actually had him in steals too. He was at 2.1. Hakeem Olajuwon was at 1.8. Now Hakeem Olajuwon, though, to a lot of people don't understand that he's top 10 in steals as a center. Let that sink in. And then of course in blocks, Hakeem had he was at 3.5, but David Robinson wasn't too far off at 3.1. So you got to get an edge to Hakeem in terms of the stats. You know, I mean, but when you talk about the team aspect of things, yeah, the Spurs were winning in the regular season and stuff. Now, I want people to understand that had David Robinson not got hurt, I may, I'm probably thinking that maybe David Robinson said had all the shooters, uh, King Justman, Sam, right? But we're talking about one on one in the post at the center position. We're not talking about and really. We're talking about in the early 90s, because like I said before, Theo, his record against Hakeem was what, 32-16. So in the regular season, David Robinson all time he leads uh, Hakeem. So if you're talking about 94 and 95, okay, yeah, that's when they started making, the Rockets, started to really come together and everything like that. But you forget Hakeem. This is the thing that I don't think people understand. Hakeem made the finals even before Michael Jordan did, but also Hakeem missed the playoffs, a couple times in his career. So, and this was at a time before, and Hakeem was getting really frustrated during that time because they weren't putting any pieces around him or anything. They weren't clutch city back in the day. There wasn't no clutch city in the early '80s and all that other stuff. And then he came in. He was with Ralph Sampson. Couldn't depend on him because Ralph Sampson was out of the league quite early. So you got to put that into perspective, because when you say that he had all those players, you say Hakeem was in position. Dame is now in the '80s, early '90s. Yeah, and the difference is that actually Dame Lillard actually he actually makes the playoffs. But the thing about it is that Dame Lillard, and I'm not trying. I know you're not trying to compare them as players or anything like that. But I have to bring this in here too, Theo. Let me say this: a lot of times he see, like right now he's starting to get older and he's starting to kind of take a back seat. Not really a back seat, but he's starting to kind of listen a little bit. It's sort of like when Jordan listened to Phil Jackson and Tex Winter and everything to see how the triangle was going to work and everything, because he had no faith in it in the beginning. Well, Dame Lillard is starting to see that with Chauncey Billups when he should have been doing that earlier. Now I know Terry Stotts wasn't no coach, that you could really say, oh wow, because Terry Stotts, man, he wasn't that great of a coach. But Dame didn't make it any better. Always wanted to play hero ball. Hakeem Olajuwon, he actually knew how to use his team, and he understood the team concept and didn't mind doing other things. But I'm not trying to get into the comparison as far as comparing Hakeem to Dame, but I'm just saying though, like the mentality was much different. Now I got to give it to Dame. He's pretty much has made the playoffs for his whole tenure since he's been in Portland. Now the success rate is much different, but you're right though, Theo. I got to give it to you. He he was in the same situation. He was in the same situation. And look, this goes to show you. Everybody thinks you got to put Jordans on the hoop in, or you got to put Under Armours in the hoop on to hoop in, or Adidas, or any name brand tennis shoes. Man, are you fucking kidding me? Look, I know a couple of guys that would go to the gym. They would wear cheap shoes on purpose, just so people could laugh at them and think that they couldn't hoop, and just be in there busting their ass and would not lose a game. You know what I'm saying? Like, just on purpose. I got to block that guy. But You know, this is like when you talk about Hakeem and when you talk about David Robinson, because I look, I like both guys. You know what I'm saying? Who did I think was better? Of course, Hakeem, but David Robinson. You know, all this stuff about David Robinson being weak and he wasn't a strong big man and all that other stuff. Man, that's cap. Because David Robinson was strong. You know what I'm saying? He kept himself in tip top shape. I mean, come on, man. You gotta have some sort of some sort of strength in order to be in the Navy. You know, regardless of what you want to think. And I just think that sometimes, like everybody looks at this right here and they think that, oh, that's the only thing that I like Hakeem for, or that's the only thing that you know that when you talk about David Robinson, you talk about him in the playoff. No, because that's not the case. Because David Robinson actually did he put up some decent stats. Like I've already read it to you. He wasn't Hakeem. It wasn't like he blew him away. Like in points, sometimes yes, okay, Hakeem they get the better of him, but you know that's just like with steals and rebounds and blocks and things of that nature. David Robinson, you know, he filled up the stat sheet on that end too. Like I said, you know, one game I think he had like 9 blocks. Let's go back to that game. Matter of fact, let's take a look at that. Let's take a look at that. What game was that? Where he had like 9 blocks. Yeah, it was. Hold on, trying to think, trying to look for it right now. Okay, yeah, it was in February. It was in February 12th of 1990. Okay, they both had 19 points. However, okay, Hakeem he got the edge on him. Hakeem had 18 rebounds, and but David Robinson he had 19, 7, and then he had 9 blocks. So those are pretty decent stats. However, Hakeem shot poorly. He shot 8 of 25, but David Robinson was much more efficient. He had 8 11. He was 8 of 11. So you know, I like to I like to put things right in its proper perspective because I don't want people to think like, okay, well, I'm not looking at these stats or we're just looking at one play or we're looking at the dream shake and all this other stuff. That's totally not the case. David Robinson personality made him give a false perception because he was quite calm, cool, and collected. Well, um, what I can say to that is, what do you? Okay, let me ask you this, Theo. When you look at Drew Carey, when you look at a guy like Drew Carey, the guy that was on whose line is it anyways, and the Price is Right and all that stuff, and then also the Drew Carey show, and then when you look at Mister Rogers back in the days, when you look at those guys, man, what do you think? What do you think, right, about those guys? And you can answer any question you want to, but I'll tell you right off the hand. Most people would think that with Drew Carey, oh yeah, this guy, he's just he wants to be a funny guy. What's up with it, Marco Hinton? I see you in the building, Texas all day. You know, okay, they'll look at Drew Carey and they'll be like, oh, okay, yeah, he's a funny guy, or he wears glasses. He's a nerd or something like that. Or they'll look at Mister Rogers. Oh, all he does is play with children and all this other stuff, you know what I'm saying, and read to children, not realizing that both of them were Marines. Both of them served in the military. Yeah, but see, both of them were Marines, Theo. So what I'm saying is that in the military, okay, yeah, David Robinson, he probably could have went out and cursed the media out like Charles Barkley, or been throwing stuff and doing all this other stuff. You know what I'm saying? But he was taught, and it does, there's guys that they go in and don't quite have the mindset of David Robinson, but he was taught self discipline, integrity, and he represented what the U.S. military and the Navy was about. He didn't want to, because they know him as being a sailor. You know what I'm saying? So he represented for them still. You know what I'm saying? He didn't want to put them in a negative light. Yeah, he's with the NBA and everything, but that doesn't mean that he has to be like take up Rasheed Wallace's personality, or um, fucking. Uh, I'm trying to think. Maybe somebody like Alonzo Mourning's personality, or somebody like that. Yeah, but see, everybody just looks at these guys like, oh yeah, well, I, they're just like these people that are just in front of the TV, not realizing that these guys had lives before they were acting, before they were doing their respected profession. You know, like because I knew that about Mr. Rogers a long time ago. You know what I'm saying? It's just like with when you look at a guy like Steven Seagal. You know what I'm saying? You wouldn't think, oh man, this guy here, he Steven Seagal doesn't strike you except for maybe his height. That's it. Because Steven Seagal is a pretty tall dude. But other than that, man, he's like, man, this guy can't fight. But he'll stand there and not even move that much. And next thing you know, man, he'll have you on the ground doing something. You're like, man, there's no way that this guy could be serving and being in law enforcement. But that's what he did. He served in law enforcement. But like I like David Robinson's game. You know what I'm saying? And listen, like people were trying to get David Robinson shoes and all this other stuff. The Nikes and all that. They weren't was in the conference finals. I'm talking about this game. You remember it, Theo? You old enough. You my age, man, and so do you. So like before that, nobody was even looking at those Spaldings that Hakeem would wear. They're like, man, if you wore Spaldings at school, you would get clowned, right? Check this out. When Hakeem was killing David Robinson and all this other stuff, and they were talking about Hakeem. Oh shit! You have starter jackets. People were wearing Rocket starter jackets. People were getting the Hakeem shoes, like the Spaldings. People were rocking Spaldings to school. Most people had like the Jordans. I know Jordan was retired, but he still had his shoe out and stuff. Matter of fact, I think they had the baseball. They had the baseball shoes with Jordan or whatever. You know what I'm saying? I remember that. But anyway, people would people would look at you like you were crazy. They'd be like, what the hell are you doing on with some Spalding? They'd be like, oh man, these are Hakeem's. They'd be like, oh okay, all right. You know what I'm saying? I'm talking about at an early age. Like nobody was rocking no Spaldings like that. But hey, if you had some Hakeem's on, shoot, Hakeem, you got to pass. You got to pass. You know, people wanted to see you with the pennies on, or they wanted to see you with with like the Jordan, the Jordan when he retired and all that other stuff, or even the older, the older Jordans or something like that. Man, they wasn't looking for no Hakeems. Even Shaq's shoe was hot at the time because I remember when Shaq had Reebok Pump. Yeah, Shaq had Shaq had a nice shoe too. You know what I'm saying? Because when a lot of people don't understand that how Reebok was hot back in the gap. You know what I'm saying? Especially when they had AI. But it just goes to show you that like he's not he man, he don't care about no damn what brand of shoe or anything like that. No, dog, he was gonna go out there and he was gonna kill you. He was a killer. Hakeem was a killer, man. He was coming to destroy you. And he didn't need to say that much. And people wonder why I have. Listen, I don't have Hakeem in like as my center for offense. I got him there for defense, but that's not to say that I can't utilize him. Like this will be like, look, all the people that I got on my squad and my starting five, pretty much they can do pretty much everything on the court, with the exception of Larry Bird. But Larry Bird was about team defense. But I see people underrate Larry Bird for the type of hustler he was. Larry Bird used to dive on floors. Larry Bird would dive in the that's why he had back problems and stuff like that because he sacrificed his body. Yeah, I mentioned that earlier, Marco. But see, that's the thing. David Robinson, he led all time in steals versus Hakeem. But that's what I was just saying. I said that Hakeem is top, the only center in top 10 in steals. You know what I'm saying? And on top of that, he's all time leader in blocks. However, you know, salute to my boy Two Raw. Uh, if you haven't sub to him, go sub to Two Raw. See, he puts things in perspective, and I have Hakeem up there for that reason, him being all time leader in blocks. But I got to go back. I had to go back and I had to look at that, and really look at the guys like Lou Alcindor at the time, Kareem, and guys like Wilt Chamberlain and Bill Russell and stuff like that, because blocks weren't didn't become a statistic until later. So some of these guys actually could have had way more than Hakeem. But I'm talking about like in the modern era, when it came to Hakeem, I chose him for that reason because he was a phenomenal defender, both with steals and blocks. And see, a lot of people don't understand. Okay, you You're talking about a guy that can move on the perimeter. If he getting steals like that. Now, deflections and maybe poking the ball away or whatever when when the guy is trying to beat you or something like that in terms of a center. Okay, yeah, they're gonna count that as a steal, but people got to look at Hakeem in his earlier days. Like this right here, Hakeem was getting older. He was older, and he was still doing moves. We're talking about a young, athletic Hakeem that could get up, and you wouldn't even dare put the shot up because he was gonna reach up and swat that motherfucker. People forget how agile this guy. Both of these guys were agile. You know what I'm saying? I can't just sit here and just shit all on David Robinson. Like David Robinson really didn't have to offer anything to offer the game. 'Cause he offered the game a lot. You know what I'm saying? But when it came to Hakeem, it was just, man. Hakeem was just on a whole nother level. He was just on a whole nother level, man. He was on a whole nother level with Shaq. He was on a whole nother level with David Robinson. He was on a whole nother level with Ewing. You know what I'm saying? Now, I I will give Ewing this. He had the shot. Ewing faced up quite a bit too. I got to give Ewing faced up a little bit because he started to develop. He started to get that jumper and everything. He faced up quite a bit, but that's when basketball and the big man, you really seen the clash of the Titans, like in terms of the big man, and that's what he came to do. He came in there. He came in there to definitely to do his job. So y'all let me know what you think, man. I appreciate everybody pulling up. Like this video, share it, subscribe, and hit the notifications. And it's Polo Sports Talking ENT, man. I get at y'all later.